WENJ, WENJ-HD, Millville, Atlantic City, 97.3 ESPN. 97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill. It's time for Football at 4 with Adam Caplan, powered by InsideTheBirds.com.
I think we have the ability to do something really special with this group, but it's going to take a lot of hard work.
Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, it's Football at 4.
All right, time for Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. And, of course, Adam Caplan's in today. But don't forget to check out the newest edition of the Inside the Birds podcast with Jeff Mosher and today's guest, Adam Caplan, who joins us now on the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Adam, welcome back, man. How are you?
Guys, good to talk to you. Yeah, we dropped a fun show. So on this one that we dropped this morning, we talk about, and I knew this was going to be something we have a message board on Facebook, which we go over, Mike and Hunter, we go over the last 10 years of the Eagles' futility at linebacker and really why they have not been able to develop that position. And we look at the reasons, and we also fast forward to this season about what to expect, and we certainly could talk about it during the segment. We also take a deep dive from our coaching sources about what's expected training camp and the challenges, because quite frankly, guys, you're not going to see a lot from rookie players. It's just not. It's going to be very, other than Jalen Reagor, I'm not expecting to get much from the Eagles rookies this season.
Well, yesterday with Jeff, we asked him about rookie roles. We can get into that with you as well and what the coaches think about that. But I want to start with that linebacker and the issues they have there. I know a lot of people look at this linebacking core, look at them as one of the worst in the league. And, why have they had so many issues at that spot? And what is their approach there? I mean, it seems that they like that, guy who was smaller, played safety maybe, and has that quicker, more athletic ability than that classic linebacker that we think of.
It's interesting, Mike. They went through that during Howie Roseman's early tenure, 10 and 11. This is when they were drafted guys. You mentioned Brian Roll's a guy. You might remember him, which is one of the smallest linebackers I've ever seen. They were going with guys 220, 225. And remember, the late, great Jim Johnson, he wanted guys who were smaller and athletic. So that was kind of a carryover from Roseman's first 2 years. They drafted 5 linebackers. Then they went through a situation where they didn't draft any for 3 seasons. And they were just really building their linebacker group with mostly veteran free agents. And it sort of worked. You saw how well they did in 2017, their Super Bowl run. It was Michael Kendricks, who they drafted in 12, but they had Nigel Bradham. It turned out to be a really good free agent signing. You remember D'Amico Ryans, Mike, who was a terrific trade that Roseman made from getting from the Texans. They just were able to build it through free agency, but that's really not the way you need to build it. You need to build it with your own players who go through your system and what your coaches want. That's really what they're doing now. If you look at Davion Taylor, who they believe is going to be a nickel linebacker. By year 3, they think he'll be a starting nickel linebacker. T.J. Edwards, who's about 240-plus, who's a thumper, who's a run stopper, but he's really only a 2-down linebacker. Duke Riley got in a trade. Talking to Falcon source about him, he started off really well in his career, and he got benched, didn't handle it well, and never was able to get back in the lineup. He did well in the limited playing time that he got, and he's more of a special teams player. Jatavis Brown, who's a really undersized linebacker, very athletic. Dante Olson is a bigger linebacker, not super athletic, but a good tackler. But I would say this. Look, there's no question, Mike, when you look at it, on paper they don't have one quality starter. That's the way the league sees it. Nate Gary's been a good guy in terms of development, a former safety, as you mentioned, but he's a below-average linebacker. That's the way other teams see him. So it's really, I think, Mike, been more of the lack of resources that they've spent. It's not been a coaching issue so much as it's been what have you really done to develop these guys? Look, when is the last time they spent a high-round pick? They haven't done it with a first-rounder. Michael Kendricks was the last second-rounder they did, and that was 8 years ago. So I think it's more the lack of really using high-round draft picks and developing those players.
Now, is that an organizational philosophy, or is there just not the guy that they want at that spot?
Yeah, it is absolutely the organizational philosophy. This started by Joe Banner. I talked to Joe about it. He always felt that you're only going to put your cap dollars, your high-end cap dollars, in high-round draft picks. He said, we're going to build it, and this was his philosophy when he came in as the team president in 94. He's like, look, we're going to build it with our offensive, defensive lines. And guess what? Andy Reid did the same thing when he got personnel control in 2001. And that's what they've done with Howie Roseman. That's why they're always competitive. But you also have to look at it. You just can't. You cannot totally ignore it, as Mosher said. He's just right. They've pretty much ignored it. And Sean Bradley's a sixth-rounder. Teams tell me that graded him. He's more of a special teams player only. We just talked about Davion Taylor, who's more of a project that you're hoping by year 3, which is what the Eagles believe, he'll be one of their 2 starting nickel linebackers. That's great. But other teams told me they really viewed him as a fifth-rounder, not like a third-rounder like the Eagles. So it's also maybe, as you and I are talking here, might be misevaluation of what round to take these guys. It's really the one position consistently that, not just when Howie Roseman was here, just consistently over the last 15 years or so, been really a lack of development because they've not really evaluated the position well enough.
Well, and then I guess this kind of goes into a 2-part question is Davion Taylor, 3rd round, Dante Olson, Sean Bradley, 6th round. Olson was a free agent guy. Did the Eagles view these guys as guys who could possibly help them, but now because they're not going to get exhibition games or preseason games and then training camp, that now that plan maybe goes out the window?
I think that's fair. Look, no one is expecting Davion Taylor to do anything but play special teams this season, so you could put him to the side. Sean Bradley, same thing, only special teams. Dante Olson, the hope is if he makes it, to be the backup Mike linebacker behind T.J. Edwards. Here's the problem, as you just said. He's a rookie. He's an undrafted free agent. He did not get any offseason. He won't have any preseason. The fourth and first preseason games are when the back-end players really shine. This is when they get a chance in the 3rd and 4th quarters. Or in the 4th preseason game, guys like Olsen probably start. Well, guess what? There are no preseason games. There is no offseason. You don't know anything about these players, so you can't just go in and say, oh, yeah, you know what? I think he's going to do this. How could you know that when you didn't have an offseason or preseason?
Well, how do you think that these coaches are planning to handle this issue?
Yeah, so Hunter, my understanding, just talking to some coordinators and coaches around the league, is that they're basically going to try to find things that these guys can do. Because you haven't had them on the field, so you can only go by what you saw on tape. And one coordinator told me, I thought this is pretty interesting. He told his assistants, I want you to go back not only on last year's tape, the 19 tape, I want you to go back 2 years ago, if they're a senior, to their junior tape, and find tape that it shows that there are a couple things they can do. Because we're going to run our schemes, but we're not going to ask them to do things that we don't think they can do yet. We got to get them through with the training camp without having an off-season or a preseason to go on. So they're just going to, I don't want to say dumb it down, but they're just going to have to give them things they know they can do. And look, one thing I do want to mention, you have a revamped coaching staff on both sides of the football. You've got a new defensive line coach. You've got a new DBs coach. You've got a new wide receivers coach. And they've got a lot of young talent at those positions, guys. To think that these rookies are going to come in and be able to be an impact, it's just not realistic. Now, look, I'll say this. As the season goes along, they may need these guys, but early on, my sense is coaches are going to gravitate more to veterans.
So how do you think that impacts someone like Jalen Hurts? I know that it was very controversial at the time, but here's a guy that can definitely be in some unique situations in Doug Peterson's offense. Do you think as they dumb things down, as you say, that Jalen Hurts will be impacted by that?
Now, Hurts, the key for Hurts is, because he's not going to have a big role anyway, Nate Sudfeld is going to be the number 2 quarterback, and Hurts is going to be the 3rd quarterback if he dresses. And Kyle Ouellette is highly unlikely to make the team. So what they'll do is, Hunter, they're going to give him a certain package. This is what I was told after the draft, that they're going to give him certain things to do. If it works, they'll give him more. I still think he's going to be a red zone quarterback. There might be situations where he's in the lineup with Miles Sanders and Deshaun Jackson to give defenses something to think about. That's only if he knows what he's doing. And this has been sort of the phrase from coaches that I've talked to. They keep saying if this player or that player knows what they're doing, they'll give him the ball, or they'll let the player on the field. If not, they won't be on the field. So still going to be a very small role. His thing is the Eagles want Hurts to be the number 2 quarterback in 2021. Not having an offseason doesn't help him with that. So next year's offseason is going to be major for him.
You said if he dresses. Can you see a scenario where Hurts is inactive on game days?
Sure. Well, let me ask you this question. If Sudfeld's the number 2 quarterback, the Eagles have a history of not dressing a 3rd quarterback in recent years. They haven't done it much unless there's an injury. Why would you dress him other than you want him to get used to being in a uniform and preparing for the game, unless you're going to use him as a wildcat quarterback or use him as a specialty player, why would you dress him? I just don't see the point of it.
Well, yeah, if you're not planning on utilizing him in any role, sure, why would you dress him? I think that would be a little surprising, though. At that point, I might question, you took a backup quarterback for 2 years down the road in the second round. If you're telling me you're going to utilize him in other fashions, then I can justify it a little bit more.
But, Mike, remember, no offseason, no preseason.
True.
The only work that he's going to get as a backup quarterback will be with remember, he's going to run either second or third team offense. He's not going to get a lot of work. Oh, by the way, practices won't start till mid-August because of the ramp-up period. He's just not going to get a lot of time. It would surprise me if he dresses the majority of the time. I just don't see it, but I could be wrong. But had he had an off-season and a preseason, he absolutely would dress most of the time.
You just mentioned the ramp-up. Practice is August. Challenges for no preseason games and how the coaches are going to handle not having those – 4 games. I know we all kind of say, they're meaningless. Nobody cares. The players don't want to play. But these back-end guys, this is a big deal for, and I'm sure the coaches like 4 games way more than the fans and players do.
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to a position coach, a tight end coach, a couple weeks ago. He said, veterans don't need preseason. He goes, this is when he actually wrote about this for InsideTheBirds.com. The phrase that he said was that it's basically the preseason is basically like NBA rookie camp. You don't see veterans doing it. It's for rookies and first-year players, and that's really what the preseason is. It's for back-end players. Now, let's move this forward here. Guys like Michael Warren, Adrian Killens, Elijah Holyfield, who, talking to the Eagles, they really wanted to see if he could eventually be their third running back to push Corey Clement for a role. It's unlikely that's going to happen this training camp because he's not having a preseason or an off-season. Guys like we're talking about bottom-end guys like Manasseh Bailey, like Marcus Green, John Hightower, by the way, who they have high hopes for, but needs to kind of get stronger physically and needs to mature a little bit. These guys are just not going to get time. I mean, that's the problem. And also, here's another one for you. Now, Jordan Mailata is obviously going to make the team, and he's one of their top guys. He'll dress every week. But not getting those preseason reps, Mike, not having an offseason. Remember, he's never played in an NFL regular season game. They love this guy. They're obsessed with him. They would like him to be their top backup outside lineman, right, left tackle. But, again, he's not getting a preseason. So I don't know that they could depend on that. They just have to see what happens with him during training camp.
How difficult is it going to be for the Eagles to get down to 80 players?
Yeah, so, Hunter, on this show, on ITB, that dropped today, we go through every player that we think that are in jeopardy. They're at 87 now. It wasn't very hard to get them down to 80. Now, teams that I've spoken to the last week think it's going to be 80. God forbid it goes to 75. Then you could potentially see guys like Raekwon Williams, who the Eagles want to compete against Anthony Rush. By the way, Anthony Rush would not be an Eagle if not for last year's preseason. Anthony Rush, who came in about 362, I'm told. Anthony Rush was one of the best defensive tackles of any rookie in the preseason with the Raiders. He was phenomenal after the Eagles cut him, and the Eagles were lucky enough to get him from the Raiders practice squad. They want Rush to compete against Raekwon Williams for the 5th defensive tackle job. No preseason and no offseason really impacts their issues about making the team. And Raekwon Williams, guys, I had 2 teams telling me that they had a 5th-round grade on him. So this kid's pretty good out of Michigan State. Keep an eye on him.
Yeah, and I know there's less opportunities. The cuts down to 80 players, the challenges of no preseason, and all of a sudden, this is going to be creeping up on us pretty soon. So what has it been like for the coaches to kind of get back into their surroundings? Yeah,
it's interesting. So some of these guys came in June anyway. They're allowed in, but they said, here's what happens. You get the swab test. You get your temperature taken. You must wear a mask everywhere you go in the building. Every NFL building has cameras. And look, there's going to be a sort of a I don't want to call him a COVID officer, but every team's going to have someone whose responsibility is to make sure all the protocols are upheld. The only time you cannot wear a mask is in your own office with no one in there. And what the other thing is, because players came in today and there's some meetings, they have to space these meetings, and not every player could be in these meetings because you cannot. There is overflow because you have to distance. So what they're doing is they're putting anyone who cannot get into those meetings will be on Microsoft Teams. It's just this is the new normal, Mike, with coaches and players in buildings, and it's even going to be even harder for the media. I got from the league. I got the restrictions. Basically, there's only going to be 10 people who could actually watch a practice close up. The rest of us will be somewhere else, farther away. They'll let up to 30 people well away from the practice field, to the point where, Mike, I don't know that I'll even go, because if I can't see practice, it's really not. I'm not someone who needs to go in the locker room. I'm talking to coaches and executives away from the practice anyway, so I don't really have much reason to go. So it's going to be difficult for us. If you want to get information, you're going to have to call people, and that's really what I've done throughout my career. But not going to be fun trying to go to practice this season.
You just saw Juan Soto, star of the Nationals, test positive, and he's going to have to miss some time in an already shortened season. How big is the fear that, this can happen to, say, a starting quarterback, and then you really don't know what to do?
Yeah, so Hunter, the couple things that they're going to do, they're still having, you remember the new CBA, which got done in March, they're going from 53 to 55 on game day, but one of those players must be a quarterback. The practice squads are probably going to go up to at least 16. There's been no movement yet to expand the active rosters, but to what you were saying, there's definitely a concern about what happens to the starting and backup quarterback. So one thing I do want to mention with this 80-man roster, cut down from 90 to 80, what some coaches have brought up to me is that they don't understand why you can't just have these players on a practice squad for training camp. Whereas, okay, they cannot practice with your people, they cannot be in the building. Let them sit on meetings virtually from their hotel room. Let them learn, and if you don't want them for the fall as part of your 53-man roster, then go cut them. But why not expose them virtually to your football team? And this is just something I think the league and the NFLPA could have done a better job of working through. But some of these guys, listen, Corey Clement, he's the kind of guy we may not know about in 2017 if we have this COVID issue, because Clement was a superstar in OTAs, and guys like Clement are not getting the practice time anymore.
Talk with Adam Caplan, Inside the Birds podcast. Make sure you check out the latest edition. It dropped today. And, of course, Football at 4 here, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Let's go real quick, rookie roles, and get your quick thoughts on some of these guys. You mentioned Rieger as the only guy you think makes an impact. What kind of role do you see for him?
Yeah, he's going to be rotating with Deshaun Jackson initially, and then I expect him to be playing in the slot because he can. I think he's going to play in the Eagles' offense. The F position is called the slot. He's going to play some slot. He'll play the Z position, which is Jackson's position. They'll probably play him at some at X, which is Jeffrey's position. Alshon Jeffrey is going to play football this season. It's still unclear when he's going to be ready. I'm told he's been running. We'll see what happens when we get to August, what he's not allowed to do, what he can do. But he's going to contribute. But the thing that Rieger has is he's got more versatility than any receiver they have on the roster. That's going to help him. And they're going to see Marquise Goodwin. He's going to get on the field. He is healthy. He's got he and his wife have had a healthy child. That's a good thing. He had to move on from the Niners, but the Eagles want to work him in off the bench. He's super explosive. So I think Rieger, though, to answer your question, Rieger's going to have a really clearly defined role, but they're going to spoon feed him because he did not have an offseason. He's not going to have a preseason.
Now, you mentioned him in the slot, and I know Greg Ward had such a great season last year that a lot of people think of him as someone in the slot right now. Is there someone else besides Rieger who is coming in as this class that maybe can step over Greg Ward?
Well, Rieger, I think you're going to see a bunch of guys play the slot. Deshaun Jackson has played the slot. He'll play the slot. He's a movement Z, but you also see him run from the slot. Rieger can do it. Goodwin can do it. Ward can do it. They'll have a committee at that position. The problem with Greg Ward is he just doesn't run very well. He's a possession receiver. He's pretty good at it, but he's running shallow routes. They needed to stretch the field. Nelson Aguilar was the epitome of when Nelson Aguilar played great in 2017. He was what they called a vertical slot. He was really good at it. Unfortunately, he could not sustain it. But they're going to have a variety of guys. And then we didn't mention J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. I know he's not a rookie, but the Eagles are looking at him as this is his real first season. I'm told he actually had a heel injury to start the season. He injured it in that Lions game in weeks 3 or 4. I think it was week 3. It was really hot that day. It was a game that they lost at home, a very close game. They had a plantar fascia injury, which I'm told he suffered in December, so he's healthy, and they're expecting to have a pretty good role here.
All right, you hit on Hurts a little bit for his role, which seems to be very minimal. Taylor as well at linebacker as maybe just a special teams guy. Let's go to Wallace. What kind of role do you see for him?
Yeah, so here's the thing, though. McLeod, Parks, and Mills, unless Mills doesn't know what he's doing, he's going to play a lot. So Wallace will compete to be the fourth safety and play on special teams, but his deal is potentially starting next year, maybe pushing Rodney McLeod off the roster. Wallace is more of a deep safety. You can move around a little bit. He's a pretty smart kid from what I've heard. But I don't see Wallace other than special teams playing a whole lot. This is just a situation with the no offseason that, Mike, to sum it up, you have to be patient. Eagle fans have to understand this is a major challenge not only for the players but for the coaches to figure out how to get these guys on the field.
Driscoll, we thought, could be up for starter. Now he seems a depth guy.
Well, not this year. He's not. No, there's no way he starts.
No. I meant before they signed Peters. Him and Pryor, maybe?
Yeah, but they were not going to do that. Pryor would have started. No, I was told that there was no consideration for Driscoll to start because he didn't have an off season. So now, future-wise, for sure. Now, their hope is if they dress 9, he'll be one of those 9 because he could back up at right tackle, he could back up at guard, and I'm told he also had snaps at Auburn at center in practice. But overall, Jack Driscoll long-term should be one of their top backup linemen, and maybe if it does not work out with Pryor at guard and once Brooks is done playing, the Eagles, I'm told, are locked into Brooks' contract for 21 because they fully guaranteed his contract in March. So he'll be an Eagle next year, but maybe in 2022 Driscoll competes for a starting job.
All right, Hightower, Watkins, those two receivers.
Yeah, what'll happen is my sense is they'll keep 6 receivers. Jeffrey will probably start. In fact, he has to. He'll start PUP to start training camp, but then depending on when they think he'll be ready, if they think he'll play in the first half, he probably would not be on reserve PUP to start the season. So it would be Jeffrey, Jackson, Rager, Hightower, Arthego-Whiteside, Goodwin, and then obviously whether Watkins or Ward or Hightower become the 6th receiver. I don't see them keeping 7. I don't see them keeping 5. It just depends if Jeffrey is going to be on the first 53 or whether he starts the season on PUP. Now, with Hightower, the knock on him is 2 things. He needs to get stronger physically. He's very thin. He's around 6'2", and he needs to mature a little bit. It's just kind of one of these situations where he's 21 years old. The light needs to go on for him, but he's a good kid. He's got to get stronger. He's got a chance. Quez Watkins, I'll tell you what, from talking to other teams, Mike, he's a better football player than Hightower, but he's got a long ways to go. But he's got more ability than Hightower. It's just he dropped to the 6th round because he's just not ready. It's going to take him a little bit longer, is what I'm told.
All right, the last two are Wanongo and Tuhill. Are both of those guys very long shots, practice squad guys?
Yeah, Wanongo will not be ready, barring a shocker, to be able to play this season. It's just a matter of does he won't dress this season. Does he make the roster, or do they waive him? Hope he passes through waivers and signs to the practice squad. And Tuhill had a really good East-West Shrine week. It'll be hard for him because Barnett, Graham, Sweat, Jernard Avery, Sharif Miller are 5. Deshaun Hall's a long shot coming off ACL reconstruction. Osman's coming off of ACL reconstruction. I'm told he's doing really well. Tuhill's a real long shot. He would have to beat out Osman, and there's such love in the Eagles building for Osman. I don't see that happening. All
right, he's Adam Caplan, the Inside the Birds podcast. You can, of course, check that out. It is dropped today, and, of course, Eagles training camp. This time next week, they'll be out there, right?
Well, yeah, but they're not practicing. They'll go through the ramp-up period. There's no practices until mid-August. Yeah, because the players will not give in, and they want a ramp-up period for about 2 weeks where strength and conditioning and lifting, so there's no practices until at the earliest would be around the 13th or the 14th. But remember, they have to be off they have to have days off. So, folks, you're not going to see much of training camp this season.
All right, Adam Caplan, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Make sure you check out the Inside the Birds podcast. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you.